Be sure to check out mythvisionpodcast.com. Help MythVision grow, guys. Become a Patreon member. You guys will get early access to all my videos when I'm done editing them. Also, it's a small community where you guys can message me your questions and talk to me in private. You guys can also donate through PayPal and Cash App. Join the social media links down in the description. We have Twitter, Facebook, all sorts of social media. Help the community of MythVision grow. Hit the subscribe button, hit that bell so you guys are notified every time I do a live video and you don't miss any of my content. Dr. Price. Pat Downs asks, Dr. Price, there is a time machine available. You get one chance at it. You can go back and talk with anyone in any time period. If that person does not exist, the gears, W-H-I-R, were, okay, and you get an error message. Who would it be and what would you ask him? Also, I'm going to guess Dr. Price will say Marcion, just because he has so much relevant information and there is no chance he doesn't exist. Mark might be a good choice, but we don't know who he was, so let's just assume the machine is not able to find anyone unless their actual name is known. Also, there's a good chance Paul does not exist, so that's not a good bet. Who would you pick, Dr. Price? Who would you pick?
Well, of course, the inevitable answer would be Jesus. And if he didn't exist, I guess the machine would just whir and so on and have to pick somebody else, in which case Marcion would be a good choice.
Or Simon Magus.
Oh, yeah.
Who would you rather see between the two, though? Simon Magus, and you get to ask him, hey, all right, or I don't know if he would go by the name Paul or something, but I wonder, would you go to Marcion and say, hey, dude, what's going on here? Or would you go to Simon Magus? I mean, let's just suppose Jesus doesn't exist. Boom. Now we're in your playing field. Jesus doesn't exist and you know it now. Okay, we'll give you a second guess. Now that Jesus doesn't exist, suppose that's certain, right? We know now for a fact. What would you do with that information, and who would you go to after that to find out more? What would you probably do?
Well, Marcion would be a real good choice, though Paul would be too, equally. And because even with Marcion, you would want to know where he got the two gods business, and why does he think this comes from Paul? Does it, or did you infer this, or do you know of people that knew him and they said he taught this? And so it would be good to satisfy my own curiosity about some things, though it would no doubt raise more questions. But it wouldn't do you any good in terms of scholarship directly, because you could never prove this happened. Well, I guess if you could submit it to scientists and say, check it out, it's a time machine, and you'll see this really could happen because I say it did. I guess you could verify it that way, possibly. And other people could go back and talk to Paul. And so I guess you could do that. But if you couldn't, you might push and now you understand what Paul really was about. You could try to make the case for that from the evidence we have, but the evidence could never prove it. It would guide you in the way you presented it, but, well, how do you know? It's possible he thought this, but you couldn't really settle a debate. And it might be one of the readings of Paul that are debated. This reminds me of one of the first books I ever read, a boy's life book called The Mystery of the Time Machine, in which these scouts do somehow come into possession of a time machine, and they go back to different places, and one of them goes to Mexico, I guess, and meets Montezuma, and he gets his autograph and comes back with it, and he says, well, he suddenly realizes, I got him to sign it in ballpoint pen. There's no way ordinarily, they didn't have ballpoint pens, and any fool but me knows it. And so I could show this to people, but they'd laugh at me. I know it's true, but nobody else will ever believe it. It's kind of like the earlier question today. When no evidence is left behind, it's a fictional prop. And this, of course, was a fiction. You would be sort of up the creek there if you said, here's my private information. And
Interesting. Okay. So suppose you could pick between Peter, James, or John to interview them if you were to travel in the past. Which of the three, based on what we know or what we've read, would you pick?
Well, I guess Peter, because he would have had, if there was a Peter, he would have had more contact with Jesus in his ministry. And I mean, maybe that Peter was a name for somebody else and all that. Like Madame Blavatsky had all these ascended masters, and they were based on real friends and colleagues of hers, but she gave them these fantasy backgrounds and names and so forth. And it was reason enough that this one scholar tracked it all down and said, okay, what's his name? Saint Germain was really this guy whom Blavatsky knew on this and that basis, and what's his name? Moria L was really this guy, and so forth. It could be something like that with who the apostles were. But if you had the right guy, somebody like that would be pretty interesting to talk to.
Interesting. Thank you, Dr.
I have a story where, like Lovecraft implies in a novella of his, The Case of Charles Dexter Ward, that this warlock managed to raise the dead from the remote or the recent past using the spell and these chemicals and stuff. And he hints that he raised Ben Franklin up one time, and eventually that he raised Jesus up. He doesn't say it, but it's pretty clear. So I decided, let me explore that in a kind of a sequel to it. And so he brings Jesus into the present, who's just been on the cross, and he's speaking Aramaic and so forth. And he has a clergyman from Boston in to witness this. And in the end, Kerwin crucifies Jesus again. And it's like, what would it make the difference you hope it would make if you could bring somebody back?
It's like automatic. He's like the automatic one who must be crucified.
Yeah.
No matter who he encounters, it's going to happen.
Kerwin was sort of doing it as a vicious joke. Because he had no regard for religion or anything else. The Lovecraft story is a masterpiece.
Interesting. Thank you, Dr. Bob.